You have an inheritance that is eternal, and the pain and suffering of this moment will pass.
The resurrection, in a single moment, showed the world once for all time who Jesus actually is.
I bring an indictment on evil. Kingdom of heaven come. I will not be passive and take it like it is. I will pray.
You're listening to the Chapel Sermon Podcast. The Chapel is a non-denominational Christian church welcoming people of all faiths or of no faith background at all. Our desire is that you encounter the presence of God wherever you are in your life.
Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. Yeah, man, this is awesome, isn't it? Getting to be together as a church family. I want to take a minute to not just say Merry Christmas to everybody in this room, but in all the rooms of all of our campuses. Merry Christmas to everybody at Grays Lake. Merry Christmas to everybody at our Mundelein campus and our McHenry campus and our Lake Zurich campus and our Palatine campus and our Whitewater campus and our Milton campus and our Jefferson campus. So if you guys don't know a lot about our church, we are one big crazy family that exists in a lot of places. And so we're excited to be together and connected in this moment, as well as to so many of our folks that are online who are around dinner tables and living rooms and hotel rooms traveling. And we just want to wish a Merry Christmas to each and every one of us today. Well, I don't know about you, Christmas is my favorite time of year. I'm outing myself, okay? I am one of those people who loves Christmas. I love everything about Christmas. I love decorating and the food and parties and just the fun that is part of this time of year. And if I were gonna think back in my life and I were to say, what are my top 3, 4, 5 happiest memories? A lot of them revolve around Christmas. From when I was a kid, from when our kids were little, from when Tammy and I were dating. But I'd have to tell you, probably my favorite Christmas memory happened 8 years ago. And my son came to me at Christmas time and said, hey, Dad, I wanna ask my girlfriend Sarah to marry me. And he said, do you think we could use the church? And I'm like, well, it depends what you mean by use the church. What are you talking about, right? And he said, no, I want to have a candlelit dinner for 2, and I want you to help me set it up. And I want to do it right in the main auditorium at Grays Lake and all the Christmas decorations. But just take everything else out. Would you help me do it? And I'm like, yeah. And so I went over and I helped him set it all up, and we got the food ready and everything was there. And it was unbelievably gorgeous. And I got to stay, which was a huge treat as a dad. And I stood in the back, kind of hidden away so that Sarah wouldn't know I was there. And in this beautiful setting, this dinner takes place, and at the right moment, Josiah gets up and he gets down on one knee and he offers her a ring. And I think we have a picture of them later on that night. That's them 8 years ago, right now. They look so young, it cracks me up, right? Yeah, man, we can clap for them. They've made it 8 years. That's pretty good, right? So in that, I was getting ready to leave, so I wanted to give them some privacy. And as I was headed to my car, there was a thought that went through my mind, and here's what it was. First of all, I was unbelievably thankful to be a part of it, but I thought to myself, I wonder if they realize how much their life has just changed. Like, they walked into this night going on a Christmas date, and they're gonna walk out heading into getting married. Like, that's a big deal, isn't it? Like, that's a lot. Like, you walk in one way, you walk out. Life is like that, isn't it? Most of our life are just one moment after another, after another, after another, that sort of is predictable and sort of goes along. But there are inflection points, right? There are moments in our life that disproportionately affect what follows. There are moments in our life that frankly change everything. About 2,000 years ago, there was a teenage boy named John who spent his life growing up in a really backwater little town called Capernaum in the back part of a Roman Empire. It was a town where nothing, frankly, ever really happened. And he spent most of his life working for his dad and doing whatever else teenage boys did in Capernaum. But one day, that changed. Because one day, he had a conversation with a man that he didn't know and had never met before, who had become the most important person in his life. And that man's name was Jesus. And that conversation sparked something in this teenager. It all of a sudden changed his orientation, made him think differently, and it piqued his curiosity. And as he drew near to this man named Jesus, he became one of the 12 who followed him around. And as he did in every town and village of Israel for 3 years, he heard everything that Jesus said. And the words that Jesus spoke changed him. You cannot emphasize it enough. It altered who he was. Jesus' words expanded his mind about what the universe was, who God actually is, and what life is about. And when Jesus did miracle after miracle after miracle, it was as if God had come from heaven and was so close that you could reach out and touch him. And every story that John had ever heard from the Old Testament about his people and about what God had done was no longer distant for him. It no longer had a legendary or mythic quality to it. It became intensely real. And hope was born. Hope for his people, hope for his nation, but also hope for himself. Because all of a sudden, it didn't really matter what sleepy little town he was in because he was with Jesus. And that seemed like the center of the universe to him. And in this hope, John grew up. And when he became a young man, he was faced with an enormously daunting task. One, frankly, I don't envy. He was called by God to introduce Jesus to the world. That's a tough deal, isn't it? He took up pen and paper and he was going to write down an introduction of Jesus, not only to the nation of Israel, but to all of the other nations. People who had varying views and points of view and ideas about what the world is and what life ought to be. And he had to somehow capture in just a few words who this person Jesus really was, what he did, and maybe even more importantly, what's the significance of his life? And he thought about it, and I'm guessing prayed about it and agonized over it. And eventually, these are the words that he chose. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, not even one thing came into being that has come into being. And in him was life, and the life was the light of mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not grasp it. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not accept him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become the children of God, to those even who believe in his name. That's a pretty good stab at it, isn't it? Those are powerful words, aren't they? I mean, we read them today and we're gripped by them. It's almost like you're diving in the deep end of the pool. John wants us to know some things about Jesus right away. The first thing is he wants us to know that Jesus' story ultimately didn't start in this sleepy little town called Bethlehem on a cold Christmas night. That Jesus was actually at the foundation of the earth. And that Jesus had existed a very, very, very long time before all of that happened. In fact, what John does isn't just find a clever way to introduce the significance of who Jesus actually was to us. But if you lived in that time, the words that I just read you would have leaped off the page at you. Because what John actually does is he takes two radically different origin stories. The origin story of the Jewish people and the origin story of the Greek people. And he builds them together and he combines them, but he also transforms them into a story that neither of them were. Let me tell you what I mean by that. He starts off with a sentence that might be the best first sentence of any book ever written. In the beginning was the Word. Let me tell you what I mean by that. It starts off with in the beginning. Have you heard that sentence before, or that phrase? Where have you heard it? Genesis 1:1. It's the very beginning of the Bible. He is taking his Jewish audience all the way back to their creation story. And he's saying, do you remember when you read that? Do you remember the story of how the great God of Israel is not just the God of Israel, but the God of the universe and created all of everything that you have ever known. And every person that has ever lived has traced their lineage to his creation. And he takes them back to that moment. But then he says more. He says, you know that God? He's Jesus. He's the Word. He was with God the Father, and he is God. That's not part of Genesis 1:1. When God speaks the words of creation, it's not just the verbal words that are coming out of his mouth, but it is the symbol of Jesus, who is actually the co-creator with the Father. And then he uses the term word. Now there's 3 different words in ancient Greek, which is what this was originally written in, that you can use for word, but he picks one of them. And the word he picks is logos. Now, if you were living in John's time and you read the word logos, you wouldn't just read word, even though that is the right English translation, because the word logos had come to mean so much more. You see, for hundreds of years, Greek philosophers had postulated a creation story radically different than the Jewish creation story. And they believed that there's this thing called logos that is the reason behind all reasons, that is the question that is behind all questions. It is the truth that governs all truth. And if you could reason your way back, it would tell you everything you wanted to know about life, the universe, creation, everything. If you knew logos, you'd know where everything came from. If you knew logos, you'd know why everything is exactly the way it is. If you knew logos, you would know what life is all about. And so what John is doing is he's taking these 2 radically different ideas of in the beginning and the Word. And he's saying you're both right, but you've both come way short. He's saying, I know that you have been looking for this idea, this logos, for hundreds of years. Plato did, Aristotle did, Zeno did, all of them did. And he says, you know what? I found it. Everything that you have been searching for, I have found. But it's not an idea. It's not a question. And it's ultimately not a reason. It's a person. If you want to know what makes sense of the universe, it's Jesus. You cannot understand creation without him. You cannot understand life without him. You can't understand God without him, because he is what makes everything make sense. And to his Jewish readers, he's saying, you can't understand creation, redemption, the God of your fathers, without understanding Jesus, because he's the greatest revelation of who he is. And in that one sentence, he blows up everybody's world and introduces them to the most important person that has ever entered the world. And his point is to say this: Jesus isn't like anybody you've ever met. He's not just a powerful leader. We got powerful leaders all over the world. He isn't just an enlightened teacher. There's a lot of those too. This is God in human flesh, the creator of the entire universe, the King of heaven that has entered history as one of us to change, well, everything. That's the message. His coming to earth is the greatest moment, well, in the history of moments. That's what Christmas ultimately is. But John says there's a problem. He goes on to say there's a problem. He says this very world that was created by him grew so dark that it couldn't see who he really was. That's crazy, isn't it? You would think that in a world that was made by God, when the actual maker came to earth, that there'd be a celebration, wouldn't you? You'd think in every city in the world, in the downtown center, crowds would gather to celebrate the coming of this creator God. You would think that kings would send treasures and their emissaries and their armies to go make sure that this child had everything that he needed in whatever way he needed it. But it didn't happen, did it? Some wise men showed up and some shepherds. But other than that, Jesus was born and lived largely a pretty simple, pretty ordinary life that the world never saw. And then it says not only that, but he came to his own people, the nation of Israel, and they didn't accept him either. Meaning, the very God that parted the Red Sea, that brought down the walls of Jericho, that they had been coming to the great temple of Solomon in order to worship, walked among them. And not only didn't they recognize him, they didn't want him because he didn't fit their conception of who they thought God was. Isn't that incredible? But John tells us, even in the midst of that, for everyone who was able to somehow see the light in the darkness and receive him and welcome him, they had the right, meaning a right that can never be taken away. Not to become his subject or his servant, but to become sons and daughters of God. Literally adopted very into the family of God, the royal family of heaven. That's what he came to do. And that's what Christmas is all about. God coming to earth as one of us to show us the way home. You know, I remember way back in the early days of our church, we used to rent a school to do all of our Christmas services in. This was way back in the day, right? And here's what we would do. The school obviously would be done with school and they would have Christmas break. We'd go into the school and we'd decorate it, right? We'd bring tons of Christmas trees and we'd bring all kinds of decorations. We'd hang stuff up everywhere. We would decorate it from one end to the other, right? All the children's rooms, all the auditorium, everything. We would decorate for Christmas. We'd hold a ton of different Christmas services, just like 7 or 8 or 9 of them. And then when everybody else had gone home, we would have to tear it all down and completely clean the school, right? To return it to the way that it was. And usually we had a pretty big team of people that did that. And we would get done and we would take everything back to a warehouse that we rented at that time. And we'd be done right around midnight on Christmas Eve. And you say, man, that sounds like a long day. And it was, but I loved it. And I had a tradition that I kept every one of those years. And here's what it was. I wished everybody a Merry Christmas, locked up the warehouse, and was made sure I was the last one to leave. And here's why. I would take a minute at that midnight as Christmas was breaking into the world to just be with God. And there was a little field that I would walk into. And it was usually snowing at that time, just a light snowfall. And you'd be amazed how quiet it is at midnight on Christmas Eve near a warehouse. Just saying. Not saying you should go there, but I'm just saying, right? It's pretty quiet. And it was like a hush had come over the entire earth. And the silence had just broken in. You know how you take your phone and you can reset it, right? And sometimes you do a soft reset if you get a glitch. But then there's a hard reset that you can do that returns your phone to factory settings, right? You know what I'm saying? That moment for me was always like God hit the reset button on the world. No matter what I was feeling, no matter what problems I had, no matter what was on my mind, it was as if I could go into that field and stand and be with God and experience him like it was the first time. And I will tell you, it was just like he hit the reset button on noise and conflict and problems and fear and doubt. And he met me in that place. And so many times I would just stand there feeling very close to him, feeling like I could almost reach out and touch him. And somehow, in that moment, in that little field, I would start to see the world radically differently than what I had 5 minutes ago. All of a sudden, I felt different, the world felt different, God felt different. Everything in my life, I just started to see from a different perspective. And even though none of my circumstances had changed, I started to feel peace and joy and a profound sense of hope because he was with me. And it made me wonder, so many years standing there, experiencing him, that if this wasn't really the gift that God wanted to give me all along, the gift of himself, the gift of profoundly, deeply, personally connecting with Jesus in a way that resets the world. And it causes something inside of us to shift. And I can't explain it to you, but it's real. You know, all of us, I think, come to Christmas, and as much as we love it, with tons of cares and concerns and priorities and pressures and fears and doubts and grief and sadness. Our life is filled to the brim and overflowing with things that we think about and we obsess over and we wonder about. And I wonder if maybe the best Christmas gift that we get this year isn't to be able to connect with Jesus and to receive him in a way that he can hit the reset button, calm our heart, fill us with peace, have us see things differently, maybe just for 10 minutes, and then have hope that's born out of the fact that we're not alone. And whatever problems we're gonna have to tackle on December 26th, we'll tackle with him. And that changes everything. My granddaughter Greta is 2 this Christmas. I think we have a picture of her. That's her right there. Yes, you can ooh and ah. That is the cutest child in the world. I'm just gonna tell you straight up. She looks just like her grandfather. And so, no, we actually prayed she would not look like her grandfather. But when you ask Greta this year, what do you want for Christmas? She gives you the same answer no matter how often you ask. Here's what it is: presents. So I want presents. Now I know that's gonna change. There will come a day in the not too distant future where my granddaughter will be pinning all of her Christmas hopes on great specificity in a list that will exist, right? And her expectations, terms, and conditions will be spelled out, right? And we will understand what a good Christmas will look like. That is not today, however. And I'm excited for this as long as it lasts, because right now she has no expectations, no conditions, no requirements. She just wants to spend Christmas with us, and whatever we bring is good by her. And I look at that and I think, man, there's something in that for me. You know, sometimes we can invite and welcome Jesus into our life, but we can have a list of requirements and conditions and expectations. Or we say, Jesus, I want you in my life, but here's what I want you to do. All right, 1, bam, 2, 3, 4. And if your life with me doesn't look like this list, I'm gonna kind of feel disappointed. And I'm gonna kind of feel like this wasn't the Christmas you and I were supposed to have. And I wonder in that moment what would happen if we just didn't forget the list, but maybe laid it down and just said, you know, I really wanna be with you. And whatever you bring, I'm good with it because you're good and it will be good. And we allow Christmas to just be whatever Jesus brings into our life today. If that sounds like something that hits you, I would just tell you, I would love to take a minute or two just to do that together. It can be this simple. Just in the midst of all the things that preoccupy us, in the midst of the things that maybe make our heart heavy or sad, in the midst of things that scare us maybe as we look at a new year, in uncertainties that we may have in our jobs or we may have in our family or our health. We look down the road and there are things that are real, and it's not wrong to consider them. But in this moment, in the midst of all of those things, maybe the greatest Christmas blessing is a moment with Jesus that can begin a process of reset. resetting our heart, resetting our relationships, and then tackling those things together from a totally different perspective and a heart that is filled with everything that God might give us. And I just want to say, man, we can start that process right now by just going to him and inviting him to come. Sort of inviting him to kind of meet us in the midst of that and bring us the peace and the joy and the hope. Would you pray with me? Father, we are so grateful for all you do, that you care about us, that you love us. And Jesus, we come before you right now, and we just stand before you with some anxiety, with some sadness, with some doubts, with some confusion. Honestly, Lord, with very little margin. And Lord, right now we're holding all of those things, and it feels like so much. And Lord, right now we just ask that in the midst of it, you just join us in the mess, in the crazy. And Lord, hit the reset button. Bring joy and peace and real hope in the midst of all of those things. Lord, help us to just somehow stand in a moment with you where you turn the world around and we see it differently. Where you reinvigorate our heart in a way that we can't do. And you bring us a peace that exists before you even change one thing, just because you're with us. And Lord, that's the Christmas present that we ask for this year. And we pray this in your holy name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Merry Christmas.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope this was an encouraging and uplifting experience for you. If you'd like to listen to more of our sermons, you can visit the messages page of our website at chapel.org/messages.